Now, were you supposed to be moving house this weekend but have had to delay doing so because of coronavirus? The government has strongly urged house buyers to postpone their completion dates while the emergency stay-at-home measures remain in place. You can continue with the transaction if you're moving into a vacant property, but if the house is occupied, both parties are being encouraged, for obvious reasons, to amicably postpone the move. Lenders have said that they will extend mortgage offers for up to 3 months to allow purchasers to move in at a later date. But I wonder if you're in this situation yourself and you're thinking, no, hang on a minute, it's really not that simple. There are all kinds of things which had to happen this weekend or next. And you really are in trouble because they can't. vine@bbc.co.uk is our email and the text is 88291. Henry Pryor, housing expert, good afternoon.
Jeremy, good afternoon to you, and thank you to you, your colleagues and your guests for keeping us informed and entertained. You do an amazing job. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it in these crazy times. And the idea of freezing all house moves, can you give us a sense of just how much difficulty that will cause?
It's going to cause some people a huge amount of angst. I mean, we're talking about as many as 200,000 people who in a normal month would be moving home, having bought or sold something. The implications, not just for them, but everybody associated with them and the wider housing market, cannot be overstated. We've got to a stage, Jeremy, where the market is effectively frozen. And although, as you've just explained, the government has allowed for some wriggle room in some instances, their very firm advice is that people should put their potential move on hold unless they've contracted to do so. But if the market is frozen, it means we don't have any transactions. If we don't have any transactions, we don't know what is happening to prices. And without that knowledge about what's happening to prices, valuers can then, in turn, not provide comfort to mortgage lenders. And so it goes on.
I suppose there's an issue here about whether somebody might have bid to buy a house and they're increasingly concerned about the economic situation with themselves or whatever, and they don't really want to buy it anymore because they think the house is not worth that much or they won't be able to afford the mortgage.
Well, common sense at the moment, Jeremy, tells us that if you have already committed legally by exchanging contracts or by signing a lease, remember, this applies almost equally to people who rent properties or who are letting properties to those who are buying and selling. Those that have already committed need to get a grip of exactly what their situation is and talk to their lawyers, talk to their estate agents, in order to come to, hopefully, a suitable and satisfactory solution to their potential the potential brick wall they're going to hit when they come to completion. But for those who haven't yet exchanged contracts, inevitably, by doing so, what the government is flagging are the potential legal, financial, as well as practical issues that they are going to come up against. The reason we have contracts and the reason that we sign them, exchange them, and in due course complete on them is because it ensures that two parties don't have different recollections of the same conversation. We therefore know that we will, for example, if I, Jeremy, were fortunate enough to be buying your home, that we are going to complete the transaction for the sake of argument on the 1st of April next week. But because we've set that in stone, there is no wriggle room, there's no ability for there to be common sense. So what the government is saying, what estate agents are trying to do with their deals they've already got agreed and exchanged, is to vary the contract. Many people are surprised that you can vary a contract you've exchanged, but if both parties agree, that is quite possible, so that there is wriggle room and an opportunity for good old-fashioned common sense.
Let's hear from Catherine, who's in Cheshire. What's your question for Henry Pryor, Catherine?
Hi, Jeremy. I have been fortunate enough to complete on a purchase last week, but wasn't due to move till next week. So I've now got stuck in the rented accommodation that I've luckily enough been able to stay in, and been granted a mortgage holiday, so I won't have to pay both rent and mortgage. However, what happens with council tax, utilities, and all these other things where I might end up having to pay on two properties?
Oh, good question, Henry.
Great question. Catherine, I mean, well done for getting over what would have been a much more expensive potential road crash. The fact that you've managed to make this work is a huge relief, but of course you're worried about what the costs ongoing are that you're going to face coming down the line. I suspect that until you get official recognition from the respective local authorities, you're going to face outgoings on both properties. And inevitably, that's going to be made slightly easier by the fact that you've been lucky enough already to have some forbearance from your mortgage lender. That, of course, is going to be something that you're going to have to pay in due course, but at least you've got that pressure removed in the short term. Many people, Catherine, are facing similar, if not more dramatic issues over what they're going to do with their finances. But the people that we are most concerned about today are those who have the practical problems that you dealt with last week very cleverly or sensibly about how they actually physically move. Most removals companies have packed up and have gone home for obvious reasons, and that means people are left having to move home but without any means to do so.
So, Catherine, there's no way of you getting into the house you now own without breaching the lockdown, I'm assuming.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm now stuck in limbo between two properties where I've got one that it's a house, my first purchase, and I can't get into it because I'm now stuck in the rented that I've been in for the last 13 years.
Totally understand. What a situation. Thank you very much. Lots of calls for Henry Pryor here. Matthew texts and says, we received the keys to our new house on the 11th of March. The tenancy on our rented flat ends on the 14th of April, and our landlord is saying we can't stay any longer. So we're really stuck trying to get work done in the house and stuff moved in before we have to leave our flat. So, Henry, that's almost the opposite situation where he's going to lose the flat but not be able to move into the house.
Yeah, this is one of those classic examples where you are having to move because you're being hounded out of your current accommodation. He's incredibly fortunate that he's got accommodation to move to in due course, and I very much sympathise with the fact that it won't necessarily be as shiny and polished, cleaned and ready to go as he might like it. But again, imagine if your tenancy had come to an end and you weren't able to do that. What the government, again, is trying to ensure is that people have dialogue. I do appreciate the landlord in this case appears to be being a little intransigent, but at the end of the day, a conversation with him, whatever his reasons for wanting to bring the tenancy to an end at this specific date, may be things that can be adjusted or that he can free up. If he can, that will ease the pressure, at least until after Easter. We're all trying to work towards that deadline after Easter, the Tuesday after the bank holiday Monday, when the current lockdown is being reviewed. If we can limp through somehow to that particular date, hopefully we'll find that we get a little breather and that we are then able to get back to some sort of semblance of normality.
Henry Pryor is with us, and your questions for him. Alex Watton is in Tiverton, Devon, says, I'm the director of a removal company. We decided to close the business down to look after the staff. Movers are in despair, but the physical act of moving house means we can't do it 2 meters apart. Just a reminder of how difficult this all is.